Good day. My job is to sort of give you a quick update on what's going on in the Israeli ecosystem, and in particular connect it to the, I think, rather exciting times that are going on here in Oz. And I've got about 10 minutes to do this, so drone, I will not. Basically, if you look at I'm trying to get these slides to work. If you look at the situation in terms of how much money is being invested in the Israeli tech ecosystem through venture capital, it's literally going off the charts. It was good 2 years ago in 2013 when we had $2.2 billion invested. It's a lot better in 2015 when there will be over $5 billion invested in the Israeli venture ecosystem. This, by the way, compares to the Oz situation where roughly you'll have about $200 million invested in companies this year here in Oz. So Israel will be about 25 times the size in terms of the dollars invested in venture-backed companies. Remember, we're about 8 million people, or 1/3 your size. 85% of that money that is being invested in Israel is now coming from abroad. So it's not about domestic capital pools. We are not blessed with your superannuation funds, but we attract funds from abroad. We're also seeing a huge increase in the average size of our exits. Right now, the exits are about $200 million on average, which is a very good place to be when we're doing early stage investments at $5 or $10 million. If you look at what's happened is we've all of a sudden sort of graduated into getting exits that are no longer just the $100 or $200 million alone, but the billion-dollar exits. Of course, the iconic company Waze was one of the first of that wave that sold for $1 billion to Google. But most importantly, over the last couple of years, we had Mobileye last year during the war that actually went public despite investment bankers cautioning patience. That company today trades for $12 billion. It's our own homegrown decahorn. You know, you've heard about unicorns. Well, decahorns are the $10 billion and up club. And this company, for those of you who don't know, Mobileye, is a leader in the autonomous driving revolution. But you'll see the other billion-dollar babies are in a broad range of activity. They range from solar to medical to cybersecurity to big data. You name it, it's happening in Israel at the moment. One of the things which is driving this revolution and the fact that we're getting bigger and bigger companies is the fact that we have a lot of serial entrepreneurs. These are people who do this for a living. If Shlomo Kramer shows up in your office and he's willing to talk to you about taking a check, take this piece of advice from me. Pull out your checkbook and write the check to Shlomo. Okay, I haven't been able to do so lately, okay? But the bottom line is this guy has built $3 billion exits. The first one was the iconic $15 billion Checkpoint, only $2 billion recently for Imperva, and $1 billion for roughly Trusteer. When you get a chance to invest in people who've been there and done that, your odds get much, much better. And this is happening across the board. We were lucky enough, by the way, to get some money in Uri Levine's new company called NG. He was the guy behind Waze. What's also happening as a result of these bigger exits and the serial entrepreneurs is the private equity crowd has now discovered Israel. It used to be that people who were looking to write $100 million checks had nothing to do in Israel. Because when your exits were $50 million, you don't write a $100 million check. But now when your exits are $1 billion, the KKRs and the TPGs and the Carlyles and the whatnot are all coming to the country and writing significant checks. So this is going to actually, in my opinion, foresee a future where the exits keep on getting bigger and bigger, now driven not just by the serial entrepreneurs who've been there and done that for a couple of $100 million and want to try doing it for a couple of billion, but the private equity people who want to drive it harder indeed. Now, we mentioned earlier the fact that the multinationals are active in the country. I would call them hyperactive. It's not just the 300 plus centers, but the fact that new companies are coming into the ecosystem who had not been there before. Apple Computer, Amazon are, I think, foremost among them. But you've got serial acquirers, people like Cisco buying 13 companies and IBM and Microsoft with 10 apiece. Once they acquire this many companies, they want to essentially establish a multinational research and development center. Perhaps, by the way, the biggest one of them was Intel, who just recently, about a year ago, announced their $6 billion further investment in Israel, where they are building a new facility for 10 nanometer chips. And they got some really good terms. Those of you who follow those negotiations, they got a long-term 5% tax rate, a $300 million government grant. I met an Intel guy recently who said he wasn't satisfied. He felt they didn't get what they really needed. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you know, that symbol of the state of Israel, that big menorah, which is in the front of the Knesset, and you guys use everywhere. We see it here on the Israel Trade Commission. We wanted to put a little sign on the lower right-hand side that said Intel inside, and they wouldn't give it to us in the negotiations. But maybe next time, Intel. Okay, now, if you look at what's going on in terms of the rise of Asian interest and involvement in the Israeli ecosystem, it's absolutely dramatic. This year, my estimate is that roughly of the $5 billion going to be invested in Israeli venture, about $1 billion is going to come from China alone. But China is not the only Asian country who's engaging with Israel in a very dramatic way. You've got Japan, where the Prime Minister made the first ever state visit this year. You've got India, where the Prime Minister is due to make the first state visit. You've got places like Korea, where Samsung made 8 different investments last year, and Singapore, which is having its second Israeli company list actually later on this week. If you look at one of the reasons that this is going to all get better, in my opinion, going forward, it's because the technologies that you and we all need are now playing into Israel's strong suit. You're coming into our home court. Because Israel, with all due respect, has not been the go-to place for social this or social that. We don't do pets.com well. But what we do well is the hard stuff. If you're looking for drones, not speaker drones, but the flying kind, if you're looking for robotics, if you're looking for big data and optics, if you're looking for medical devices or analytics, then Israel's your place. So to the extent that these things are going to become more important in the worldwide tech ecosystem, so is Israel going to take a stronger position going forward. Now, one of the things I just want to talk about a little bit is the rise of crowdfunding and how that's going to change both Israel and the global ecosystem going forward. Here in Australia, you're expecting new regulations from Kelly O'Dwyer and a bunch of others. I know there's a lot of excitement about this, but the reality is that worldwide, everybody wants to get into the private company investment business. They've realized that if you look at what's going on with public tech companies, more or less the alpha is gone, right? If you look at the size of these private companies, whether it's Uber or Airbnb, the value's all blown up. And once they go public, how much more value is there today? It's not like the good old days when if you bought Microsoft or Apple or Oracle at IPO, you could make hundreds of times your investment. Even among the best public investments today, like Facebook, you're getting 3 times. The reality is you have to get into these private companies. That's why the PE guys are now going in earlier and butting heads with venture capitalists. And that's why people around the world are saying, I want some of this. Now, crowdfunding, there are many different brands of it. There's the reward stuff on Kickstarter. There's also the equity crowdfunding, which is what we do at our crowd. And it turns out that this is going to unlock, in my opinion, not only a lot of opportunities for investors, but a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs to start getting funded. So today in equity crowdfunding, we're up neck and neck with AngelList in terms of being a leading platform. We're announcing today, by the way, that we've just reached $50 million of crowdfunding from Australia. That's Aussie dollars, by the way, that have been raised on our crowd. And we now have 1,000 Aussie investors. And what makes this exciting for us is that we are now essentially part of a worldwide network where you have Israel and Australia working together. We've made 2 investments in Australia already, and we're making, obviously, investments around the world, 90 different companies at our crowd. We feel, by the way, that when you look at the future of crowdfunding, it shouldn't be to create a sort of junior IPO. You shouldn't just take companies and stick a bunch of investors on their cap table. That will actually hurt these companies going forward trying to attract venture capital. We think that crowdfunding needs to be managed and needs to actually include a focus on what you do after the check is written. We like to look at it as a combination of both the best worlds of angel investing, where the individual gets to choose, together with the professionalism of venture capital. And if you look at what we do, is we choose a bunch of companies, we select the best, and then we invest our own money and we open the deals to the crowd. We actually have some pretty impressive statistics in terms of our platform. And again, what it shows is I think the next phase of Israeli leadership in technology. It used to be that we were sort of the farm team, that people would come to Israel and pick up our technologies, big companies would buy our companies, investors would come in and get bargains. But now we're actually competing with the big boys, and we're investing alongside the big boys. And in terms of crowdfunding, Israel has now become a leader in this on a worldwide basis. If you look at, this is our portfolio, and you see simply the breadth of what Israel is doing. Israel has got activity both in everything from consumer hardware and the Internet of Things to consumer software to ag tech to healthcare, marketing, cybersecurity, the enterprise, and whatnot. You'll see these companies today and how dynamic they are. And finally, just to make a final statement, by the way, and the companies are good in the crowdfunding area. We're actually getting winners who are winning awards. So if I want to just make I have a minute and a half left, some comments about what's going on between Israel and Australia. Right now, Australia has a new government that is focused intently on innovation. And frankly, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that your prime minister gets it. When he talks about innovation, this is not a buzzword. This is somebody who has deep knowledge and really understands what he's talking about. But it seems like the government as a whole is moving towards creating this innovation statement in the next month. And I think the opportunity to now do work between Israel and Australia has never been better. It's amazing that we're two small countries, but together we can do great, great things, both in terms of penetrating world markets, making capital come into these companies, and the spirits of both of these countries put together, I think, can create really some magic. So we're going to step up our game here in Australia. We've already opened an office. We're going to be looking for more investments. So those of you who are entrepreneurs, please send us your business plans to our crowd, because we don't want to just bring investors into Israel. We want to bring investors into Australia. And together, I think we can have a real impact on global innovation. And I look forward to meeting with you during the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. All right, hands up, who remembers the show I Dream of Jeannie? A show about a magical wife who could make a meal appear within seconds and a wiggle of her chin. Well, you're going to see the first of our innovation highlights now. I'm going to ask Doron Marco to come up to the stage. Doron holds 100 patents and has had a number of previous exits, and he's going to show us his amazing Genie. Thanks, Doron.
Thank you.